Hi, this is Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of RegAlytics, with your update on this week's 28,837 regulatory alerts. As promised, I'm continuing my walkthrough of the One Big Beautiful Bill so we can all stay educated on what's actually going on in Washington. And this week, we're diving into the sections that tie directly to the federal government shutdown, which is now in its 21st day, and the impasse is over Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. But before we get into the modern drama, let us go back in time. Before, in 1965, there was no guaranteed health coverage for anyone, okay? And the only people who had health care insurance were typically employed, healthy adults. Anyone who wasn't employed or healthy, forget about it. But as the population aged and suddenly the healthy people wanted to retire, they couldn't because healthcare had gotten so expensive. And there were all these stories about people losing their entire retirement savings due to an accident or an expensive treatment, and people just got fed up with it. Also, charities would deal with the poor people, but eventually the cost of healthcare completely outstripped donations, and there was just a ton of poor people getting sick and infecting healthy people. So this all changed with President Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society programs. The Social Security amendments of 1965 created Medicare, which was for seniors, and Medicaid for low-income individuals and families. The idea was very simple. The federal government would partner with the states to share the cost of healthcare for vulnerable Americans. Then in 2010 came the Affordable Care Act, which filled the gap for anyone between poor and old. So people who didn't have jobs, kids between 18 and 24. And it expanded Medicaid to more adults and created marketplaces where people could buy private insurance even if they didn't have a job. And this was supported by federal tax credits to you. But instead of paying the tax credits to you, they sent it to insurance companies. And that law de-risked the insurance companies' burden so that they were able to dramatically reduce the rate, which obviously increased the number of people who had health care insurance. So now we get to the One Big Beautiful Bill, which focuses on something called FMAP, which is the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage. So that's the formula of how much the state pays for Medicaid and the federal government pays for Medicaid. You would think it's 50-50 all the time, but no. There are times where states get an enhanced rate, meaning the federal government will pay for more than half. So what the One Big Beautiful Bill does is identify places where the federal government will no longer pay this enhanced rate. And starting in 2026, it can pay no more than each state's normal FMAP. It sounds like a very small technical change, but it's really a very large funding cut. And it shifts more of those emergency care costs back to the states. And while yes, one provision technically affects care for undocumented immigrants, the broader political fight is about how much Washington should keep paying towards Medicaid at all. So where does the Affordable Care Act fit in? The One Big Beautiful Bill doesn't actually overhaul the Affordable Care Act itself. It does include a few side provisions, like it requires more verification for eligibility, and it will certainly cut off coverage for immigrants, but those are pretty narrow because the real crisis is that outside the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Affordable Care Act's enhanced federal premium subsidies, that little extra help that keeps the plan affordable, they're set to expire at the end of 2025. And if Congress doesn't extend them, the math is very simple. The money has to come from somewhere. So if the federal government stops paying part of your premium, the cost shifts. To who? Well, no matter what, it's you. Because either you're paying for your own plan, or you're getting a pay cut or less of a bonus or less of a promotion because your employer is going to pay for it, or you're paying for it in state taxes because your state picks it up, or, and this is the harsh truth, you just go without care and you pay for it with your health. So when the Democrats say they're fighting for health care, they're actually talking about keeping those federal subsidies alive, not just for immigrants, but the tens of millions of Americans who rely on them to keep their coverage affordable. As of today, the shutdown has triggered more than 600 new regulatory alerts just in the last week, but both parties are playing the narrative. So Republicans are accusing Democrats of wanting to fund health care for illegal immigrants. Democrats are focusing on two things, which is reducing the cuts to Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. And as always, we will stay tuned to see what happens next. And that's it this week for RegAlytics. We have the global supply chain of the world's regulatory alerts in one very easy to use place. If you need a solution for anything related to regulation, give us a call.